G'day guys, welcome to another installment of Conversations with AI. Today we will be addressing the issue of immigration here in Australia and how it relates or contributes to the housing crisis. So we will be pushing artificial intelligence, probing the great intelligence that is artificial that so many of us rely on. And today we'll be asking the question, does a reckless immigration policy contribute to the housing crisis? Now, this video is in response to a video that I saw a little while ago where there are a group of women, a group of young ladies who are claiming that immigration is entirely not responsible for the housing crisis, and it has everything to do with really bad, really poorly designed policy designed to benefit the elite, or rather the home-owning elite in this country, at the expense of everybody else. And while I tend to agree with that, basic premise, there is also a huge contributing factor that is significantly contributing to Australia's situation with regards to housing and its unaffordability, and that, of course, is immigration. So we're going to test AI here and see what it has to say about the matter. So first thing we need to do is actually acknowledge whether or not, or determine whether or not there is in fact a housing crisis in Australia. So this is going to be our first question. And just as you might have imagined, of course, artificial intelligence is going to come back with the obvious answer, which is yes, Australia is experiencing a severe and widespread housing crisis. Now, I'm scrolling down here pretty quickly because I want to see why. I want to see the primary causes. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe immigration is not to blame, or it is not a factor. But among other things, so tax and investment incentives being one of them. And now this is what the young ladies in this video were referring to: historical government policies such as capital gains, tax discounts, and all of these other things incentivize hoarding of properties. But also down here it mentions rapid post-pandemic population growth. That wouldn't be immigration, would it? Of course it is. It's just a fancy way of putting it. So we're gonna test AI a little bit further here. And our next question is: so excessive immigration is partly to blame for the current crisis? And its response, once you push it a little bit more, is yes, actually. Economic consensus and recent data show that rapid post-pandemic immigration has been a major driving factor contributing to housing, the situation with regards to Australian housing. However, there is a caveat. So it tries to kind of steer you away from it again. It's just given itself up. It's just said unequivocally, yes, it is a problem. However, there are, of course, it's more nuanced. There is more to it. And of course there is more to it. But we're just sick of being gaslit. We are completely over it. We don't want to be told, or we don't want people to try and convince us that having too many people vying for not enough housing stock is not the problem. So we're kind of going through here, and it does say at the bottom here there is a current political debate within Australia. Opposition parties argue that immigration caps must be strictly held or tied to housing completions. Now this makes a lot of sense, and I would argue that we probably need to put a halt on all immigration until we have enough houses to house, to cater to provide for the existing population. You know, the people that we have in this country need houses. There's no point bringing more people in if we can't house them. So once we get the housing back up to suitable and adequate stock levels, then we can start reintroducing our immigration policy and reintroducing people into this country. But until such time, no immigration, zero net immigration. My next question is kind of leads us, just we want to be explicit here. So we really want to know, like, is it hard to argue in favour of excessive immigration when we consider basic supply and demand principles? So applying the most basic economic um, principles here from a strict short-term supply and demand framework, it is very difficult to argue for high immigration when housing supply is completely inelastic. Um, it's strange though, because when you listen to people in government, the politicians, talk about anything, it always comes back to Australia is a multicultural society and we love immigration and we're a country built on immigrants. Um, whilst some of those claims may be partly true, um, it's really hard to understand or make sense of why the rhetoric around immigration is so positive, given that the facts of the matter make it really difficult to argue in favour of. To have got from a basic economic principle, you're going to be pushing prices up. That's not good for your citizens. Your citizens don't want to have to pay 50 cents, 60 cents of every dollar they earn towards putting maybe 70 cents towards putting a roof over their head. Australians want to be able to afford housing. And if you've got government policy that's completely reckless and completely void of any regard for the Australian people, and that policy is contributing to them being able to, for them not to be able to afford property, then that's not a good thing. You're not doing a job very well. So we're going to keep pushing AI here, and we want to find out, immigration, is it being used to prop up Australia's fertility rate? Its response here is no. That is not entirely correct to say that immigration has to be high strictly because of a low fertility rate. So it is admitting that Australia's fertility rate is low. Not only is there a housing crisis, but there's a fertility crisis. And when we say fertility crisis, what we mean there is um, the rate at which men and women of Australia are actually having children and reproducing. So perhaps, when politicians say that immigration is good and Australia is a multicultural society, what they're actually trying to do is divert attention away from the fact that Australians are not having children and that that's a really bad thing. But of course, as we see here, um, we we need to fund the tax base. So all the politicians actually care about is their bottom line. So they don't care where the money comes from. They don't care who the money comes from. They just need the money, and they're going to take it from Australians, whether they're having children or not. And if they're not having children, well, they're going to import people in. And when they import those people can prop up the Australian economy. Those people can support the tax base. Those people can support the ever expanding bureaucracy who does little more than come up with ways to waste taxpayer money. So we want to really just keep AI on track here. So our main theme here is, does a reckless immigration policy contribute to the housing crisis? We have got a little bit sidetracked now because we're finding out actually that the immigration policy, is not in existence or does not exist because we're a virtuous people and we're a kind and compassionate people and we love multiculturalisms and we love immigrants. It actually exists so that it can prop up the tax base, so that politicians can continue to pay themselves $250,000 a year plus benefits, so that the elites can continue to waste taxpayers' money, as I mentioned, and that the Australian citizens can be gaslit into thinking that we are good people because we bring foreign people in. So what I'm trying to find out here is, it's kind of giving some conflicting responses. So I want to know, didn't you just say, however, that the main reason for excessive immigration was due to a demographic deficit? If Australians were having children, then wouldn't then we wouldn't need to import the population. Um, and I've lost my question there, but But it says here, yes, that theory is correct. If Australia's fertility rate were above replacement, um, then um, then we wouldn't. So this will naturally sustain. Would be able, then this population would naturally be able to sustain itself. So we don't see the talking heads in the media and our political elite saying, um, hey, Australian men and women, why don't you have a baby? Why don't you have some children? Why don't you grow a family? They're not saying that at all. They're saying, hey, we love immigration. We love immigrants. We are a country built on immigration. Um, let's celebrate multiculturalism. Let's celebrate diversity. And you guys don't have to worry about having children. There's no pro family advertising at all in this country. It's all pro immigrant. And this is the reason here the big Australia. When you see the big Australia, that just means a big bureaucracy. And the big bureaucracy um, is in control. And it's the one setting the terms, it's the one defining the narrative, and it's the one that is executing its objectives, which fundamentally, primarily, is to support its own interests. So the catch-22 of the modern family, the modern Australia family, or the situation here, there is a final cynical irony to this problem. One of the main reasons young Australians report having fewer children or choosing not to have them at all is the prohibitive costs of housing and living. By using high immigration to instantly prop up the tax base, the government inadvertently drives up housing demand and rental costs. This increased financial stress makes it even harder for local couples to afford a home large enough to raise a family, further driving down the domestic fertility rate and cementing the reliance on immigration. Ultimately, you are correct. If the domestic birth rate were healthy, the fundamental demographic justification for immigration would disappear. The high intake remains because consecutive governments, so that's governments on both sides of the political spectrum, have chosen to rely on immediate external growth rather than fixing the structural economic barriers that prevent locals from having families. So I think that's fairly conclusive, fairly decisive. In sum, to summarise, if Australians were having children, which they're not, and we're not going to get into the reasons as to why they're not now in this video, but we will potentially at later stages. If they were having children, we wouldn't need immigration. We wouldn't see such pro-immigration rhetoric within Australian politics and within the Australian media. We wouldn't see pro-immigration videos like the one presented by the young ladies that this video is referring to. And we, as it claims, as artificial intelligence has helped us to understand here as well, we wouldn't see such unbelievably high prices for Australian property and Australian rentals, pushing Australians into financial hardship. There are other factors, but we have to acknowledge that immigration is a significant contributor to Australia's housing crisis. Thanks very much for watching.